All right. So for a lot of sellers, their best way to grow is going to be by growing internationally on Amazon. Because if you've already figured out Amazon, the hard part is just figuring out the setup and what do you do once you're beyond that? How do you grow all that? That's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited because we brought on Jerome de Guigne, which I hope I did not butcher last name. I
It
do
was
not
very
speak
good.
French. My Spanish, I hardly even remember Spanish from taking it for 4 years. French is a whole different world for me. But Jerome, thank you for coming on Maximizing E-Commerce podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, and we always love to talk about expansion and especially Europe because we're based in Europe. So it's going to be an exciting session.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, just for everyone's quick background, we'll get more into your background, but where are you right now as we're talking?
So as we're talking, I'm based out of Luxembourg, which is a very
Hmm.
small country in the middle of Europe. So
Hmm.
if you see France, if you see Germany, Belgium, then it's really between those three. And it's very minute country, but
Hmm.
it's got a lot of European clout, let's say.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. And you're originally from France, if I remember correctly?
Exactly. I'm half British, half French, but I was born and raised in France.
Okay. Well, good, 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 good. Well, I'm excited to get into this conversation because I think for a lot of people, they go into maybe Canada, they go into maybe the UK, and then it gets extra scary. A lot of people don't even go into Canada or UK because it's a little scary because it's a different country than the US. But then going into Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, all that gets real kind of scary for people. There's different languages. The rules are very different than what we're used to. At least with Canada and UK, it's all based on English common law, whereas the laws kind of diverge a little more once you start getting into mainland Europe. So, how do you make sure you're set up for success and all that fun stuff? So, before we get into that, I would like to just know a little bit more about you. How did you even get into this whole Amazon world um, to help people with the European side of things?
Yeah, so it's like it all started. I was head of Europe for a Chinese brand actually for a
Okay.
long time, and I was into distribution, brand building, and then at some point I decided to open my own company and
Hmm.
to work on. And I was on my own basically, so I was the boss and also the cleaning lady and the one doing
Wearing
everything.
all the hats.
Exactly. And I started at the beginning helping brands just expand on like distribution and so on. It wasn't working very well. And until I found out that when I started to talk about Amazon, because I had been doing a lot of Amazon, then
Hmm.
people started to open up much more saying,
Mm.
okay, yeah, like when I was asking, you need help to with your distribution, with your distributors? No,
Uh-huh.
not really. And then I said, oh, do you sell on Amazon? Oh, yes. Do you need help? Oh, yes. So that's how it all sort of triggered based on demand and market demand, if I can say so. So for a long time, I was on my own, and then with two, three people, and then lately, since 2018,
Mhm.
I started to grow, like I had more and more demand, and I was probably ready myself to grow. And now we're around 50 people and helping brands from all over the world to expand internationally. So
Mhm.
Europe is a big part of our business, but we do also expansion to the US,
Mm.
to Japan, to Australia, to any Amazon country, let's say.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. So you focus on expansion. So and the name of your company is E-Commerce?
Exactly. So it's e-commerce made simple, but shortened.
Oh, okay. I was wondering how the name came about. Like maybe that was a language play, but e-commerce made simple.
Yeah, the funny part is of the company is that when I created the company, I named it the Great Wall because I was working in a in a Chinese company, so it was a
Okay.
bridge a bit between my old life and this new life, and I wanted to help companies
Hmm.
build something which lasts for thousands of years. That was a bit the story.
Oh, okay.
But like as soon as I was working more in e-commerce, the Great Wall didn't make any sense, and then you had the movie.
Sure.
Then SEO didn't work very well. So I made a tagline which was Amazon made simple, and it worked for some time until someone from the legal team of Amazon came to me and said, "We love the fact that we you love Amazon, but you can't use it in your name anywhere on your website or anything like that."
Mm.
So I said, okay, I need to change the name. And I said, okay, I'll change Amazon to e-commerce. E-commerce made simple. And I said, okay, e-commerce. So, okay, that's how the name came.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. But when people think of e-commerce, they generally think of Amazon, especially these days. And so, yeah,
Exactly.
that's that was sounds like a good thing to do. I'm always kind of a little bit like apprehensive using Amazon's name too much. I mean, I think we all are using the name Amazon, but like I could see how they might have a problem if you're using it in your name and tagline.
Exactly, and they were very friendly in saying, okay,
Sure.
you know, that's okay, but just, you know, please, you have 3 weeks to, you know, remove that from your website. And I think that was fair, so we
Okay.
did that, and it's their name, it's patented, so that's cool. The funny thing is that e-commerce and e-commerce,
Hmm.
a lot of people, when they say e-commerce, you can hear e-commerce, so it's a bit like, I like that
Okay.
sort of
A little bit of a play on it all.
think,
Yes.
yeah, play a bit on words. So but
Hmm.
that's what we do. We have mostly on Amazon, but we help brands expand on other marketplaces. In the
Okay.
US it could be Walmart, but in Europe you've got a lot of other marketplaces also.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. Now, you and I first met. I had heard your name from somebody in your team had reached out to me last year at some point, um, and you and I first met face to face at Prosper Show, where E-Comas had a booth as well as you were speaking. In fact, we were talking about before we hit the record button. The session I was in was a panel, and that was before lunch, and then you were right after lunch, and
Exactly.
you were talking on your own about expanding into Europe. So I think we'll spend a decent amount of time on this conversation on the European part. Now, one thing I do want to point out to people that I think is interesting is Prosper, for those who didn't go, they had all these different tracks, like with different kind of topics. And international had a track. Your talk and my talk were in the same room, and it was all in the international track. And then there was another track for Walmart. And Walmart is, I think it's a great opportunity. Why not? I mean, Walmart's technically a bigger company than Amazon. I think of the Fortune 500, they're one and two. Walmart's one, Amazon's two, although most of Walmart is in store purchases. But you know, Walmart is making a play for e-commerce. So I think there's kind of this grass is green on the other side. Like we always think like something's better away from where I'm at. And so I think for a lot of sellers, it seemed like the rooms were a little bit fuller in the sessions for Walmart, but I would make the argument people are going to almost without fail do better result wise, at least first going into Amazon international marketplaces. I think I've only met one person who's ever told me their Amazon Canada sales were dwarfed by their Walmart US sales. What are your thoughts on why somebody might want to spend time figuring out international marketplaces versus trying to diversify off of Amazon?
So I think that's a great point. I think it's in terms of potential,
Hmm.
if you look at the potential of Europe as a market, it's probably the same size as the total American market, if not
Hmm.
bigger. It is bigger if you look at the number of people. In terms of
Right.
Amazon, it's probably not as big, and specifically you have to go country by country. But in terms of potential, is it's huge, right? Because it's a second, like it's the same size of the US. Now, Walmart as a company is huge, obviously, but the e-commerce part is much smaller. So if you looked at numbers, I don't have numbers right here, but
Mhm.
like clearly the potential of Walmart in numbers to like the ones of only going to the UK, Germany, and maybe France is much bigger, obviously. Now there is it's about managing risk of expansion
Sure.
or doing so. It's probably more in a comfort zone to go to Walmart, it's the same system and so on, than to go to Europe, or maybe Canada is closer. But it's true that the question is about, okay, how you can uh, mitigate this risk, or how
Sure.
ready you feel about going in those areas. So for me, obviously, and I'm a bit biased because I'm in that world of like expansion, but that like the potential is enormous, and usually most brands are really have or see that so much potential that it makes a lot of sense to go into Europe. Now, I know less well Walmart, but for me, it's like if you take if you make the efforts to go into Europe or Canada, then Europe, it's a much better win, and it's a more sustainable win, especially Europe, because the market, once you're inside, it's very difficult to get you out, because it takes some work to get in. So it's also a very stable business once you're in.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because the scary part with international is more the setup. Once you've gone past the setup, you have kind of a moat around your business protecting you from potential competition, just because a lot of people say, I'd rather go into the Walmart session, even though their results will probably still be better with international marketplaces. But once you're up and running, you already understand how Seller Central works. I say this sometimes, and I know this is a gross oversimplification, but really the biggest difference is the money symbol might look different. And like one thing that might throw you off if you go into Europe is don't use a period when you put in the price, use a comma, because otherwise the on the Euro system, the period and comma have opposite meanings in when putting in prices. But for the most part, for most sellers, they're going to have such better results going internationally, and they don't have to figure out new terms of service, new customer expectations. The fulfillment network works pretty much the same. The barcode systems work the same. Yeah, you'll probably have to translate your listing going into most marketplaces in Europe, but you're still going to have to translate your listings for Walmart, so to speak, with how Walmart's algorithm is looking at things. Walmart is working very hard to not be the next Amazon. So you might not get into WFS right away, their Walmart fulfillment system. So there's a lot you have to figure out on Walmart. Once you get in the door, there's a lot more there. Whereas if you understand Amazon and you do the work on the front end, you'll generally get better results with less work to maintain it. Is that a fair statement?
It's true. Maybe you would have differences on some categories, or
Sure.
one big thing is the brand awareness. That's a bit the elephant in the room, in a sense. Like if your brand has really no consideration in Europe at all, probably the short-term win will be on Walmart, because then you can expand quickly if you're quicker, if your brand is well known. And if you're completely unknown in Europe and you have very strong competitors, okay, that could be a struggle. But if your brand is reasonably well known, or if in this category there is no big brands in Europe, then you probably have a bigger chance. And then to the differences you were showing, that the comma and the thing on pricing, this is true. The second thing which is important to note is that your prices in Europe include taxes, which is called VAT. And that's usually a big difference.
Yes.
Because we in Europe, we always have taxes in our prices, which are shown. In the US, for Europeans going to US, we always say, okay, why did I pay so much? It said on the label that it was, 21. Why am I paying 24 or 25 at the end? Because the taxes are at the end in the US, whereas in Europe, it's always upfront, which is the habit of business, right?
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more on that here in a moment. But what I do want to ask is just for market potential, how would you recommend to someone to figure out what is the market potential? Am I going to be fighting against big brands that I've never heard of that are in Europe on this? Or, is it going to be like the US, where I'm looking at a Bluetooth speaker that's a brand that I've never heard of before? And a lot of products like that on Amazon, where people are becoming less brand concerned as they are, let's say, review concerned, or, does it look nice and does it look like it's going to meet the potential of what I want?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically, as a European-based agency, I would say, okay, you can ask for help to people to help you understand the market, and we typically do that for a lot of brands. Now, this is not the only way. You can go yourself on Amazon, make a research on the keywords, on your branded keyword, on the product, or find Google to translate the main keywords. That's one way. The other way is you've got the tools which are well known from everyone, like Helium 10s, Jungle Scouts, Profitero, a bit higher end. Those kind of tools will provide you a lot of insights on how the market is working. now the next thing you want to do is probably talk to people locally and say, okay, how does that brand resonate? What's the size? To get a bit of context information. So either you do it yourself and you take the time, or you find people who are got their feet on the ground and can provide you with that. It's true that even for large brands, we work with some very large brands, and we make studies and we show there's brands they've never heard of because they live only on Amazon. And they take a big chunk of the business because they're a very simple business. They only ship to Amazon only, and it's a very simple thing, and they can be very big, and those big brands don't even know about them. So there is a life offline and a bit a life online on brands. So it's taking into account those different things, and maybe you can have very big competitors in some categories from other markets, specifically, for instance, in France. So France is a very big market, but Amazon is much smaller than in the UK or Germany. Why? It's because there's a lot of big competitors in France which don't exist in the other countries. So sometimes on some categories, actually Amazon is not the best player. So you want to understand what's the dynamic in some of the categories. Okay, maybe you probably want to go on another platform at some point, or not focus on France first and then go to the other markets. So it's also understanding this mix. And now with the new markets, specifically Poland, Holland, and Sweden, there are other players. Bol.com is very well known in Holland, but you've got also Allegro in Poland, and in Sweden you've got also local champions. You need to understand what's the environment like also for each country. So that's difficult to know when you're far away. So it's either you find someone to help you, or you just go into forums and discuss with people.
Okay. Yeah. Good ideas. Go into forums and ask people on the ground or things of that nature. If you know someone who's from a different country, like they're from France or from Germany, hey, what does this mean to you? So it's not like there's something offensive in your name or something like that. And so that way you could have it, looked at by someone that could potentially help you, figure out like how much time to spend on it. Now, one of the things that's going to be very different within Europe than it is for Americans is here in the US. I live in Florida. Most of the time when I send stuff, they have me send it to North Carolina. Then Amazon will move stuff from North Carolina to Michigan and Texas and California and everywhere else. Does it work like that in Europe, or are there certain caveats, or make sure you do this first?
So yes, the simple answer is yes, mostly. But you have to check some things before you can do that, really. And that's where we will get into VAT. It's also since January of 2021. Is it 2021 or 2022? I have a doubt now.
It was the beginning of last year that the border closed off for Brexit.
Yeah, exactly. So the UK has gone out of the UK. So now the UK is a bit different from Europe in that sense. So
yeah, it's no longer in the European Union.
So you have to take UK as one continent, let's say, and the rest of Europe. So generally, yes, you can, and it can be as simple as that. But you need to be careful because you need to have some prerequisites to be able to do that.
Yes,
legal prerequisites.
Sure. All right, so let's start getting into some of the legal prerequisites, because this is the part that scares a lot of Americans. Is we have sales tax, which has no bearing on where you store goods. There's no sales tax when you import things into the country. There's generally not sales tax in a B2B environment. So it's really just, I sell a product for $20 on Amazon in the US. The customer is based in Dallas County. And if it's a 8.25% sales tax, then Amazon adds on 8.25%, and Amazon takes care of all that in the back end. For a lot of sellers, they probably aren't even registered in Texas to be able to collect that sales tax. Amazon just handles it. Can you describe, and feel free to take steps back and explain things, because this VAT can get real complicated, especially for those who aren't even familiar with the basics of how it even works. What is a value-added tax, and when do people need to be registered?
Okay, so that is a system. It works similar to tax, what you call taxes. So
Uh-huh.
basically, it's added onto your end user prices. The thing
Sure.
is that in Europe, it's all, like I said earlier, it's always included. So you need to be careful because this value added tax is included. So if you see a product which is sold for 19.99, probably the net price, so without the VAT, will be 17.90, for example.
Hmm.
So yeah, Americans often the case they look at it and say, okay, oh, that's interesting. Actually, you need to remove the VAT. And it's quite funny because Amazon is an American company and it didn't like really understand that system. And if you go to the FBA calculator on Amazon France or UK or Germany, it sort of it doesn't exclude VAT. So you need to put a net price. Otherwise, it sort of puts VAT as a profit. So you need to be super careful.
Mm.
And even when it calculates the Amazon fees, like the 15% Amazon fees, it
Hmm.
calculates it on the VAT.
Yeah,
So
and that's in reality. That's not just in like a calculator. They're going to charge whatever the price that's advertised to customers.
exactly. So if
Okay.
let's say your price is 100 euros to or 100 pounds to end consumers, including that, Amazon will charge you 15 euros, basically. So 15% of that total amount. So, which for European is crazy because normally you shouldn't be charged on VAT because VAT is for the government, not for yourself. So it's just the first thing is that you have to understand prices in Europe include VAT. Now, what's the principle of VAT? The principle of in Europe of VAT is that you have to pay VAT back to the government, right? And
Mhm.
it's for B2C. So when you're selling to consumers, that VAT is included. If you were a 1P, so a vendor account with Amazon, for example, and you were selling from the US to Amazon Germany, you wouldn't have to pay VAT because it's B2B and B2B doesn't get any VATs included involved, right?
Mhm.
Like I have customers outside of Europe, we charge them without VAT. That's a normal process. Now, the issue comes when you're a seller and you're selling to end consumers. So you are making a sale to an end consumer and it's your duty to make sure people are paying VAT. So as you said, Amazon will not add VAT for you. So you will need to make sure on Sell Essential, you include the prices including VAT. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is the principle of who should pay VAT and when. The principle is quite simple. Is basically the last place where the product was located is where you need to pay VAT. Example: if you're warehousing or you said to Amazon, I want to keep the stock, the FBA stock in Amazon Germany
Mhm.
only, if a French customer buys and it's shipped from Germany, the VAT is due to the German government. Okay.
Mhm.
If it's sold into Germany, then the VAT is due in Germany. Now, if you've decided to have the option to have pan-EU FBA, which is a bit the same you were talking about with North Carolina and
Mhm.
Michigan, if you click on pan-EU VAT, you say to Amazon, you can move my stock around, that's okay. Now, that means that instead of having your stock in Germany, it moves into France. And if a French customer buys a product, it will be shipped from the French Amazon warehouse to the French consumer. Then you're due to pay VAT in France. Now, everybody knows that France and Germany are not the same country. It's not states like in the United States. Each country has got its fiscal organization. That means if you want to sell into those different countries, you need to be registered in all of the different countries where you will be warehousing your goods. So the key is, where do you warehouse your goods? And that's where you need to be registered to the government. And then I won't go into details, but basically on some part, Amazon will pay the VAT to the government. Some parts you will have to pay the VAT. So like B2C, everything B2C will be Amazon. Everything B2B normally is you to pay because some B2B will have some VAT. And Amazon will give that money. However, you still need to make a declaration to each government. So if you're still awake and you're still not dizzy, that's good news. But basically, the idea is that you can have people help you on that, and it's once you get the hack of it, it's quite simple. But you need to be careful that at the beginning, when Amazon came, they didn't really care about VAT, and they say, oh, okay, it's Europe, we don't really care. We're American, we do what we want. The thing is that now governments have put a lot of pressure on Amazon specifically, and Amazon, if you don't have a VAT number in your account, will close your account. So it's super important. Like, you have a risk of being
Right.
Amazon will stop you because the governments, like different state governments in Europe, have said it's your liability, Amazon, if the sellers is not paying his VAT, and the liability is quite high. So now they've enforced very strict rules, is that if you're selling in your warehousing into one country in Amazon, you need to have a VAT number. Otherwise, the system will close your account.
Got it. Now, that's a very good point. And so, yes, especially in the UK, they give you 90 to 120 days, depending on whether you can prove that you have started the process of registering for VAT there. Some countries are quicker than others to get you a VAT number. So definitely talk to somebody to understand the ramifications of this, because you can sell, basically, if I'm understanding this correctly, and from my own experience here, but you can store in a country as long as you have VAT registration. You can sell to other Amazon marketplaces, like you can sell, because it's not just, they're not going to Amazon.de necessarily to buy. They could go to Amazon.fr and Amazon.it and Amazon.es for Spain, France, and Italy. They could go to those marketplaces, buy there if you have your listing there, and then have it shipped from Germany. You don't necessarily have to be registered in Italy unless you want to store goods in Italy. Am I repeating that correctly?
That's 100% correct. Plus, there's a new system called One Stop Shop.
Yep.
Which is, you can handle all of your European VAT from one country if you store in only one country. So in your example, you could handle your full European VAT with only one country, which is very cost saving, because then you have to pay only one country. Is simple. The only drawback is that your products will be Prime eligible, but they won't have the one-day delivery, because it's impossible to deliver from Germany to Spain within 1 day. It doesn't work. So it's just mitigating what's best for customer experience and what you want to do, and and the cost that it has.
Yeah, exactly. And some of it is because there is a cost to being registered in each country, because you have to have somebody do the filings for you. Don't even try to do it yourself. There's so many landmines you can step on in VAT. Some places, like in the US, some states, you could probably figure it out on your own. Canada, you can probably figure it out on your own. Europe, definitely hire someone to do it, because you don't want to mess that part up. So, okay. So one of the things that also,
as an example, sorry, is like, we are Europeans, you do it ourselves. Like, we have accountants, because we have a seller account selling in all over Europe. We don't. We've got people on the because each country is different also in the way it approaches its VAT. So it's like, you want to have people which are locally, and there are groups we can help. We can help if anybody wants. We've got the connections. So yeah, I totally agree with what you said.
Yeah, definitely. And now, one thing that throws a lot of Americans off is, you bring goods into America, you're probably going to be charged a tariff. The tariff could be a small percentage, could be as high as, I think, 35% on some goods. So there's that, and that's, you just pay, and that you're done. So I'm paying. So what throws people off, and I've had this question worded this exact way: if Amazon's taking care of my VAT for me, why am I being charged VAT when I import? I know the answer to this question, but I just want to tee you up to kind of explain, why is there an import VAT? And is that the same as what the customer's paying, or does that actually help them in the long run? Or does it balance itself out? Maybe is the way to phrase it.
So yeah, the clue is in the question. So
yes.
Amazon, Europe, we like to make things complicated, right? So it's not a land made for businesses, really. It's for mostly for people. So with this in mind, it's like they say, okay, when someone is importing a product, you have import fees, and on those import fees you have VAT. So typically when you are importing goods, you need to say, okay, I have actually a VAT number and a URI number, the famous URI number. And
Mhm.
that's URI number is very important to be able to import goods. Without this URI number, you cannot import goods, basically. So you need to have this URI number to be able to book the VAT you will be paying on those fees.
Mhm.
And now that's what you've paid to the government. And now when you will start to sell your products, let's say my example of the rates, the percentage of VAT is different per state. Of course,
Mhm.
everything is complicated here. But let's
Okay.
say it's an average, more or less it's 20%. So let's say on my example of 100 euros or 100 pounds, you have 20 euros, which is actually government money. So let's say you've paid 1,000 euros of import duties on your container, and on that you had 20%, so 200 euros. So typically you will have paid out to the government, so the government owes you 200 euros. So once you start collecting VAT from your own sales of products, so in my example of 100 euro per unit, so you're collecting 20 euros. So basically, the government will say, okay, you deduct those 20 euros from the 200 euros we owe you. So it sort of reconciles.
Mhm.
So that's why you need to have this URI number, because if you don't have that URI number, actually you can import, but you will have lost the VAT.
Right.
So the idea is to do that. If we go a bit more advanced, if people want to hear a bit more
Go
complex,
for
but
it.
more exciting, is that what a lot of brands do is that they go to Holland, and in Holland you have a lot of bonded warehouses. What does that mean? Is that the container arrives and it goes into a warehouse, which is a bonded warehouse, meaning it's not really in Holland. It's not already in Europe. It's in a free zone. Why would you want to do that? Because you can have a deferred payment on the duties and the VAT. So that means if you don't want to have, if you have a tight cash flow, then you put that in the bonded warehouse and you only import, like you say, okay, I need only one pallet. So you import only one pallet. So that's the first benefit, is you have deferred VAT. The second benefit is that because of this bright idea of Brits' friends, because of Brexit, the UK has got also import tariffs. So before, if you came into Europe, that was the same world as, or environment as UK. Now it's different. So let's say if your products are coming from China, if you import them to Europe, they've become Europeanized and you've paid the tariff on that, custom tariff, right? But if you wanted to move that to UK, then you would have to pay again the custom tariff. Only the products which are produced in Europe don't get to pay twice. So the thing is, the bonded warehouse is a good idea because you can put it there and then decide if you send the goods into Europe, mainland Europe, or into the UK. So for people who are a bit more advanced, this solution, and Holland is very good in that, and they've developed a lot of solutions around that, is a great solution to provide, like, to defer VAT, so help your cash flow, and second, to prevent you to pay double income, custom tariffs for your products.
Got it. Got it. And that's a more advanced strategy to look into. You wouldn't necessarily do that if you're sending in like a case of something to start off with. It might be too much administration,
You
basically.
would not want to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit now about, let's say you're in Europe, you figured out maybe you're registered in Germany, maybe you're registered in France. France also has some favorable conditions for importation. We don't have to get too deep in the weeds and all these things. Talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about, because these things get real complex real fast. But let's just say you're selling. So it's in another language. Maybe Amazon translated your listings for you. Maybe you put in a translation, but Amazon didn't change the listings right away, or so whatever. So let's just say you're starting off with an Amazon translation. What are some things you should do um, to improve sales and to really grow the business in foreign language marketplaces?
So the first thing you need to do, and which is the obvious one,
Mhm.
is investing in content. Like if you're from the US and you're a consumer, if you have Chinese characters in your description, would you want to buy the product?
Hmm.
Not sure. In Europe, it's even more so. It's like if in Germany you make a mistake in the language, and believe me, it's very easy to make a mistake in German on like putting an N, or because even for SEO purposes, you could say, ah, no, I don't, because there's some grammatical changes on the words and so on. I
Their
won't do it.
language is
I'll
very
keep the
precise and a lot of compound words and stuff like that.
yeah, if
Yeah,
it's neutral, masculine, or feminine, and accusative and all of that, typically that will put German customers off. Like if it's badly written, that's typically not going to sell well, because they say, that's not genuine. That's not, that they're not talking to us. In France, also, it's like the proper use of French. Like French people are in love with their own language, so like the way you write it is super important. Uh, British, obviously, it's English, so that's easier. But like, you need to be super careful about how you talk to customers, and the metric to see that is conversion rate.
sure.
Basically, you will see that your conversion rate will not pick up if you don't have really content, which is for the customers. If all of it is in English, believe me, the people, like business people, might want to buy, or if your brand is super well known, or your product is super in demand, okay, maybe. But if you want to build a brand, that's something you really want to do. And one thing to highlight here, that this costs money, like, and I would really not advise to cut costs on that. And it's not because I'm, selling those services. It's like, however you want to do it, you could find freelancers or anybody to do it, but you need to make sure this is native speakers first,
Hmm.
and that you double check. And my experience is that most of the time you do something, and then other German speakers will check and say, no, actually, I don't like. To be fair, if you have a British English and American English reading the same text, they will always argue about this is not, the right word and so on. Plus, you have this complexity of SEO. So the SEO is not always like a keyword is not always the exact same keywords translated, right? It could be a somewhat different word, which is used in the language because of a lot of reasons. And that's for SEO reasons, you need really to make a check in every country. What are the main SEO words you want to put in your titles and description?
Hmm.
So this is really one huge investment you need to make, or huge in terms of importance, and it's quite costly. If it's not costly, it's probably a bit fishy, to be honest. And that's why we often recommend to go step by step. Don't try to go 5 or 6 languages at first, because
Hmm.
except if you've got 2 products, but it will cost you too much money. So you want to build step by step, and go in each country, build success, and then go to the next one, instead of trying to be everywhere, not in a very good manner.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of things with Europe, you can always add the complexity later. You can always register for VAT in more countries. You can do translations in more countries. It's better to just get in the arena and get started, is kind of my philosophy. And then you can make decisions from there. And almost without fail, for most people, Germany is going to be their number one selling marketplace, just based on the economy, buying habits of people there. Is that a
It's a
fair
bigger
statement?
Amazon market.
Yeah.
So actually, the number one market is Germany, followed by UK, not far off.
Hmm.
And it's like the benefits of Germany is it's bigger, and second is you start to have access to the rest of Europe much easier. And I talked about the one-stop shop, meaning if you stay in Germany and you keep your stock in Germany, you can
Hmm.
still start to access the other markets in a cheaper way, on a
Hmm.
more simple way. Once you're in the UK, you cannot really move outside of the UK, because they've made it a closed island, in a sense. So, like, if you don't want to invest in languages or anything, okay, UK is a good market. Otherwise, Germany is, if not the first, your second move to go to.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So Germany would be a good one to go into. And the nice thing about UK is, for the most part, they use pretty much the same words we use here in the US. There's, always some alteration of the way people describe things is a little bit more different between UK and North America, because Canada and the US tend to be almost the same. But every country, I mean, like even within the US, like there's the debate sometimes we get into, the sugary carbonated beverages. Is that soda, pop, or Coke? And so, there's always going to be some debate. And like you even said, like even sometimes within the same country, maybe within different regions, like there's people that speak the same language might have different opinions, but sometimes you just got to start, let the market tell you what's actually working. So, okay. So how do you manage PPC? That's the hard part, because a lot of people put, as much as they think they're very analytical with their PPC, there's really a lot of emotion. There's a lot of gut feeling of this keyword is going to eventually turn around, or they make decisions not necessarily just purely on numbers, but they make it on how they feel about that keyword, or how optimistic or not optimistic they are about their keywords. How do you do that when you have no concept of the language other than Google Translate, which is still not perfect?
So you've got, to be fair, you've got two ways.
Mhm.
The one way is you don't know the language and you have to go analytical. So you have your automatic campaigns, they
Mhm.
are yielding, the keyword. Then you have manual campaigns, and then you sort of optimize. This is possible. Now, obviously, if you know the language, or if you have some knowledge, or even native knowledge, then you will go much faster, because you say,
Mhm.
okay, that keyword doesn't make sense, or I'm losing my time. So you will win in efficiency. The PPC part is less of an issue, language barrier part. It's true that depending if you're doing sponsored products, that's okay. If you start to do sponsored brands and sponsored display, then the complexity adds
Right.
on. But typically, if we go back 2 seconds on the content side, is that the
Okay.
content is also linked to how culturally people approach the way you describe products, right? So typically, if you look at cultural gaps or differences, and there's no right or wrong, right? It's a cultural thing. Like in Germany or in France, also, you would have to explain stuff. You cannot only state it's great. Like typically in Germany, is like, why is it great? Like, why do you, what's your metric? You're saying your product is this or that. You need to explain me how you came to that conclusion, which in the States is less the thing. It's more about endorsement or something like that. In Europe, a lot of people will be skeptical. So it's typically about how you approach this mentality or the way of explaining products, right? So
Mhm.
depending if your product is very technical, um, or less technical, that will depend on how you will change your content. And then when you look at your advertising, it's like, okay, what kind of audiences, also what kind of people you will target, or the kind of keywords you will look for. If you have the knowledge of the language, then obviously you can go much quicker, much faster, and picking other keywords, and be much more like feeling much more what you need to look after or look for, sorry.
Yeah, it's a good point. At the end of the day, it's all a search engine. So people are using words to describe things, to tell the algorithm, this is what I want. Algorithm, give me options. And then the algorithm's going to decide based on a variety of factors. So, you can't sell calculators on iPhone case. No matter how much you bid on iPhone case, chances are your calculator will probably never show up. So in some ways, the algorithm will kind of protect you somewhat too from like way extreme ones. Although just I've learned, pay close attention, because sometimes like a weird customer search term, especially on if you're using broad modifiers, but maybe I found sometimes it's better to start with exact and then branch out as you get more belief in the certain keywords and things of that nature. But yeah, so excellent point. Understand the cultures and the content and all that. So, what other tips do you have for folks as they expand out into international marketplaces as we start to close out this conversation?
Yes, if you look into advertising, for example, is also sometimes because of the nature of the markets. I was saying, for example, in France, maybe the category is smaller, so you can have issue. Like it can be tougher to sell. Like the demand in the US is overwhelming, and
Sure.
it's like the demand on Amazon, everybody in there. In Germany and UK is fairly true. It's the same. On other markets, a bit less. So that's where you want to start to find niche keywords. Like you need to adjust your
Mm,
strategy. The usual one of like, okay, I'll go on keywords, but maybe there's a major brand which is there and, you know, overwhelmingly taking everything. So you want to look into a niche kind of research of, okay, what type of keywords maybe I could, you know, benefit from. So it's that's where also local people can help you find those kind of sweet spots. So that's one thing which we've seen can work when you know the usual doesn't work at the beginning. The other thing is, like we said, and once again, is like Europe is complex, so you need to gather a lot of information and either find someone to help you do it. So we can do it. There are other very good agencies which can do it. Preferably for me, European, because some Americans could say, yeah, no, I can take you into Europe. But to be fair, it's very difficult, even for us in some cases. So try to find someone to help and then really go step by step, and maybe sometimes baby step is like build your success and learn how to speak to like maybe the first Germans or British people, and then you build from there and you get a taste. And you need to make money like it costs a bit of money at the beginning, especially investing in translations and so on. So you get to learn and then you can expand.
Well, great. So if somebody wanted to learn more from you or your team, where would they go?
So we're very active on LinkedIn. So you can search for me, Jerome, E-Commerce, or you can go on e-commerce.com. So we've got a lot of things there. We do webinars, we do podcasts, and a lot of stuff. So you can learn a lot about, okay, how to expand on Amazon in Europe.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this is a good conversation, and hopefully people got a lot out of it, and appreciate having you on.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thanks, Jerome.